America asked for a ceasefire, and Iran rejected it on live TV. That's the kind of story that lands like a hammer because it feels like a clean moral. One side wants peace, the other side wants war. But real conflicts don't move in clean morals. They move in incentives. And if you don't understand the incentives, you'll get emotionally yanked around by every headline that sounds like a turning point. So let's slow down and unpack what this actually means, what it doesn't mean, and what happens next. Because this moment isn't just about a ceasefire, it's about who thinks time is on their side. First, let's be honest about what we're really hearing when people say, America asked for a ceasefire. Sometimes that means a formal channel, diplomats, intermediaries, backchannel messages. Sometimes it means a public appeal from the top, designed to shape the narrative and test the other side's posture. And sometimes it's the loosest version. A public statement gets interpreted as a plea because the internet loves framing every move as panic or victory. Either way, the key point is this: the ceasefire message was put into the public space, and Iran responded publicly too. When Iran rejects it on live TV, it's not only about the answer, it's about the audience. Iran isn't speaking only to Washington. Iran is speaking to its own population, to regional allies, to rivals, and to every neutral country deciding who looks strong and who looks weak. So the rejection isn't just a diplomatic move, it's a theater move. Now, here's the trap. The internet wants you to take that theater literally. Rejected on live TV gets translated into diplomacy is dead, war is inevitable, escalation is guaranteed. But that's not how ceasefires work in the real world. In real wars, ceasefire talk doesn't usually appear when everyone is calm. Ceasefire talk appears when someone is hurt, someone is exposed, or someone wants time. And that leads to the first big question you should ask: who benefits from time right now? Because time is a weapon. If you're taking heavy damage, time lets you breathe. If you're applying pressure successfully, time can feel like a trap because it lets the other side recover. So why would Iran reject a ceasefire publicly? There are 3 reasons that matter, and none of them require you to believe anyone is crazy. Reason number 1, Iran doesn't want to look like it blinked. In conflicts like this, the first thing leaders fear is not military defeat, it's the perception of surrender. Because perception becomes internal instability, and internal instability becomes regime risk. So even if Iran wanted de-escalation privately, rejecting a ceasefire publicly can be a way to prevent the narrative of weakness from taking root. It's a message to their own base. We are not backing down because someone asked. Reason number 2. Iran believes a ceasefire now would lock in a bad bargain. Think about what a ceasefire actually does. It freezes the map. It freezes the momentum. It freezes the damage, right where it stands. If Iran believes it's currently losing key assets, losing senior figures, or losing strategic infrastructure, then a ceasefire right now could feel like stop the bleeding while we're behind, which can look like acceptance of losses without leverage. And if Iran believes it still has leverage to gain through continued missile pressure, regional pressure, or simply surviving long enough to shift global politics, then rejecting a ceasefire can be their way of saying, we're not done writing the terms. Reason number 3. Iran is trying to force conditions, not accept conditions. This is the part most people miss. When a spokesperson says, no point talking ceasefire, it can be a rejection, yes, but it can also be a demand in disguise. It's a way of saying, we will not stop while we're being hit. Meaning, if you want a ceasefire, change what you're doing first. That's not diplomacy being dead. That's diplomacy being conditional and ugly. And that's how many ceasefires are born. Not through mutual kindness, but through mutual exhaustion and conditional commitments. Now, the next question is, what does America asked actually signal? Because if the U.S. is publicly pushing a ceasefire message, that can mean at least 3 things. Option 1. The U.S. genuinely wants to contain the escalation. That's the most straightforward interpretation. Option 2. The U.S. wants to test Iran's stance publicly. Because if Iran rejects a ceasefire in blunt language on television, it becomes easier for Washington to say, "We tried. They refused." That's not just diplomacy. It's narrative positioning. Option 3. The U.S. wants time too. Not because it's weak, but because in modern conflict, even the strongest side can prefer time to manage logistics, protect bases, replenish defensive systems, and keep allies aligned. So, asking for a ceasefire doesn't automatically mean panic. Sometimes it means we want control. Now, why does it hit harder when it's on live TV? Because live TV creates a feeling of finality. It feels like a door slammed. It feels like the world just watched it happen. But here's the truth. In modern conflicts, live TV rejection is often part of the bargaining space. It's posture. It's meant to stiffen your spine in public so you can still negotiate in private later. You can say no ceasefire on camera and still be talking through intermediaries behind closed doors the same day. That's not hypocrisy. That's how states manage two audiences at once, the crowd and the back channel. Now, let's talk about what this moment means for the next 72 hours, because that's what people actually care about. When ceasefire talk appears and gets publicly rejected, you often see one of two patterns. Pattern 1. Escalation to improve bargaining position. If Iran believes leverage is gained by showing it can still strike, you can see a push for a high-visibility action, a big volley, a symbolic target, something that changes the emotional temperature, not necessarily because they want endless war, but because they want to enter any future talks with proof that they still have teeth. Pattern 2. Escalation control while maintaining posture. This looks like continued attacks, but carefully managed, enough to maintain narrative strength, not so much that it triggers a catastrophic spiral. This is the walk the ledge strategy. Keep pressure, avoid the step that forces the other side into a bigger response. Now, here's where a lot of viewers get manipulated. They hear Iran rejected ceasefire, and they assume that means Iran is confident and winning. Not necessarily. Sometimes the loudest rejection is the biggest tell that a side fears looking weak. When you're truly comfortable, you don't need to scream it. So don't treat volume as victory. Treat it as posture. Now, let's address another important piece. Why do these ceasefire stories come bundled with emotional language like on live TV, humiliated, begged, panicked? Because the information war is trying to force you into a binary. Either the U.S. is collapsing and pleading, or Iran is irrational and suicidal. Those are both caricatures. Real strategy is usually more cynical and more human than that. Leaders want power, control, survival, and leverage. Ceasefire talk is one tool among many to shape those outcomes. Now, what does this mean for Israel and the region? Because a U.S.-Iran ceasefire narrative isn't just about those two, it affects everyone watching. If a ceasefire is even whispered, markets start pricing risk differently. If a ceasefire gets publicly rejected, risk premiums can spike again. Shipping risk, oil risk, insurance risk. Because the world hears, this isn't calming down yet. And that ripple matters because economic pressure becomes political pressure, which is exactly why everyone cares about the optics of a ceasefire. Now let's talk about the biggest danger in this moment. It's not the rejection itself. It's the compressed decision-making that follows when both sides feel they must prove something. If Iran feels it must prove resolve, it may strike. If the U.S. feels it must prove strength after being rejected, it may respond. If Israel feels it must restore deterrence, it may escalate. And when everyone is proving something at the same time, miscalculation becomes more likely. That's the real risk, not that people want world war, but that the environment becomes too crowded for clean control. Now, here's the framework you should use to judge what happens next. Don't watch the statements. Watch the behavior. 3 signals. Signal 1. Do back channels keep moving? You won't see the back channels directly, but you'll see hints, softer language, talk of intermediaries, sudden pauses, coordinated humanitarian corridors, quiet changes in posture. If those appear, it means the live TV rejection was posture, not the end. Signal 2. Does the strike tempo change? If Iran rejects ceasefire and then launches a dramatic wave, that suggests they're trying to gain leverage through escalation. If Iran rejects ceasefire but keeps attacks measured, that suggests they're managing escalation while maintaining public posture. Signal 3. Do the US and allies change posture? If you see rapid redeployments, higher readiness messaging, more defensive assets being surged, that can indicate they expect escalation. If you see simultaneous talk of ceasefire and defensive reinforcement, that can indicate they're trying to control the latter while still preparing for the worst. Now, let's be honest about what this moment does psychologically. When people hear ceasefire rejected, they stop expecting relief. That's the point of rejecting it publicly. It hardens expectations. And hardened expectations can become self-fulfilling because everyone starts acting like conflict is guaranteed, which increases the chance of conflict. That's why public rejections are dangerous. They don't only communicate policy, they shape emotion. Now here's the most important takeaway of all. A ceasefire request and a televised rejection do not mean diplomacy is dead. They mean diplomacy is being fought over. They mean each side is trying to control the story of who is desperate, who is strong, and who gets to set the terms. And in that fight, the next moves are rarely peace tomorrow or war forever. The next moves are usually leverage moves. So if you're trying to understand what's coming, don't ask, who's right? Ask, who needs what right now? Who needs time? Who needs momentum? Who needs a visible win? Who needs an off-ramp without humiliation? That's how ceasefires actually happen. Not because everyone suddenly becomes kind, but because everyone eventually decides the next step is worse than the pause. Now, I want your take. Do you think this was a real failed ceasefire attempt, or a narrative trap, where one side wanted to look reasonable and the other side wanted to look unbreakable, even if private talks still exist?